be your instructor today. Today we're going to be looking at drawings. This is a little breakdown of Drawing 101. Some of the things that we're going to be attacking today in our learning is going to be lines, boundary, shape, and space. Now, we're going to focus mostly on lines and shape and boundaries, and we'll start to touch on space a little bit. We will not be discussing very in-depth shading today, just a little discussion of that. Alright, so stay tuned if you want to learn about how lines work and the reasons we use them and how to communicate more effectively when you're doing your drawing. So, the first thing we're going to discuss today is lines. Lines come in a couple different variations. We have vertical lines, horizontal lines, diagonal, combination lines, and curved lines. Now, is that the all-inclusive line list? No, it is not. There's a lot more lines out there. Take it from me. But these are the kind of grandfather and grandmother, kind of old relative type of lines that all the other lines kind of come from. Okay? So we're going to learn about those. Now the first type of lines, vertical lines, which are lines that go straight up and down. Those lines are thought of as stable. And when I say stable, I mean they feel mentally comfortable. You don't feel like they're going to change up on you. Okay? So we've kind of divided our lines into stable or dynamic. Okay? Now dynamic means movement, change, energy, difference from one thing to the other. Okay? So it's kind of a sense of excitement, whereas stability, feeling stable, feels same, repetitive, or not necessarily repetitive, but feeling of flatness, relaxedness, calmness, dependability is a good one. That's a good word. So, vertical, of course, up and down lines remind us of up and down, looking up and down. They remind us of lifting, so something coming from the floor up like an elevator. They can remind us of being strong, okay? Something that's strong like a pillar can support weight. Tall. They literally make us feel like we're looking at something that's tall. Height, that makes you think of height. Now tall and height are a little bit different. Tall is kind of a descriptive word for feeling, and height is more about a measurement, okay? So we relate those things to vertical lines as well. Plunge, okay, that's a feeling, more of a feeling kind of word, adjective, where we feel like we're going downward quickly, okay? Positive and negative, okay? So that means good feelings, negative feelings, good associations, negative associations, and it's also linked to spirituality, which could be heaven, hell, good, bad, good, evil, whatever you want to think of it. So some good examples of some lines that are vertical, you will see a lot of vertical lines in trees, right? A lot of trees are very tall and they make us look up, right? So a lot of the lines that we're going to learn about today, and a lot of things in general in art, are mimicries of nature. Okay, and since we all kind of share the universal language of nature, we can learn a lot that way by just paying attention to nature and using that to communicate. So in art, we have translated that into almost like a language that you can use to effectively draw or design. Okay, so if we move on here and we think about these stable lines and we think about the different type of traits it has, if we think about the possibility of positive, negative, heaven, hell, things like that, that's why a lot of cathedrals around the world or places of worship will be very tall, and you'll see a lot of arches in them. So that is because when you're looking at the line of the wall in the doorway, you look at about eye level, and then you look up, and then you come back down again. So that very tall line plus the arc, and then coming back down as a vertical line, makes us feel and think about up and down and our relationship to it. So vertical lines are about our relationship to being strong or weak, tall or short, stable or unstable, and in this case, stable. Okay, moving on, horizontal lines. Horizontal lines are kind of a little bit of the opposite, but at the same time the same, which is kind of confusing, right? Yeah, it kind of sounds confusing. They're stable because they're dependable. Lines that don't have a lot of change to them or energy feel stable, especially lines that go straight up and down or sideways, okay, horizontal lines. Mostly that stability comes from the mimic of nature in the horizon line. When you look out your window, your horizon line into the distance is always flat. Even though we're on a curved Earth, from our point of view at any fixed point, unless we're close to the stratosphere, everything's going to seem flat in our horizon line. And that is dependable. We can look out our window any day of the week and go, oh, there's the horizon. Ah, yep, good old dependable Earth, still being flat on the horizon line there. Okay? So, this sideways kind of feeling also has some other connotations. Okay? Feeling of laying, okay, of restfulness when you're sleeping, okay, and we relate that to laying flat while we're resting. A feeling of forever. Horizontal lines have a feeling of forever because depending on how we view them, we view the horizon as kind of unending. You can't find the end of the horizon, okay. Water, okay, still water, flatness, the calmness of water. And then also gentle, has a feeling of gentleness, okay? But once again, it's stable. It feels stable. And stable meaning dependable and non-changeable, okay, in this context. So those two lines are dependable and stable. That's why a lot of our language has a lot of straight and horizontal lines in it, because it's easy for our brain to interpret very quickly, okay? Diagonal lines. Diagonal lines are a little bit different. Those are called dynamic lines, and they are from side to side. Okay, they don't have to be from a corner to a corner in anything, but they are angular, so they are not this way or this way. They're somewhere in between. Okay, so they have a feeling of falling. They have a feeling of movement, of zooming, of direction. Okay, and of course they have a feeling of actually being diagonal. Now these lines are a little bit interesting because they're an easy way for us to add excitement into our artwork. When you add in angular lines, what you're doing, it leads the eye around like a zigzaggy snake. And that's an easy way to create kind of interest in your artwork and your drawings. Okay? But it's also a little bit more than that. The feeling of dynamic lines also gives us a slight sense of danger. And because our brain is always on the prowl for possibilities of danger, it's one of the first lines it notices. So we'll pay attention first, hierarchy-wise, to diagonal lines before it pays attention to vertical and horizontal lines. Because think of nature. If you were out in a storm and you have two trees, one tree being falling sideways like this and one tree straight up, and you needed to go and get under a tree to get out of the rain, are you going to go to the one that's straight up with branches going like this, or the one that's like this at an angle? You're probably going to go to the straight one, right? Because you're afraid if you go under that tree, it's going to fall. Okay, so our brain's always aware, in a small sense, of danger, and it also finds that slightly exciting at the same time. So even if it doesn't say, "Ooh, dangerous," it says, "Ooh, exciting," and it pays attention to diagonal lines. Then we have combination lines. Combination lines are 1, 2, 3, these three lines together, which is vertical lines, horizontal, and diagonal. Okay, so you have the strength of up and down, the calmness of stability, and then you have a diagonal line that comes at you like this. And then that creates perspective. See the foreshortening in my hand? So I have this line here, this line there, and then if I come down towards you like this, that becomes perspective, okay? So diagonal lines added to horizontal and vertical lines create depth instead of a feeling of flatness, okay? And those are very stable. Because there's a feeling of three-dimension, it feels like something that can be self-supportive, okay? And even though there's a box up here as an example, combination lines come in a lot of different varieties, okay? And a lot of combination lines we see when we draw, we think of them slightly different, okay? And I'm going to explain. These last two are kind of, I guess you could say, opposites in a way. Combination lines like this that are very angular and attached together with diagonal, horizontal, and diagonal, horizontal, and vertical lines give us a feeling of that perspective, but they also give us a feeling of being kind of man-made. So thinking of buildings, thinking of an air conditioner unit hanging out of a building, thinking of a desk or a chair you sit in, all those things, thinking of a street that comes out at you, and you have two diagonal lines going this way, right? You have the sides that are straight on the rails, okay? Those lines all add up to feeling of depth, okay? And they're very dynamic, very dynamic. Even though it's stable, it's a little tricky. Even though it's stable, that dynamic view comes from the diagonal lines like we talked about, okay? Now, the other end of the spectrum here are curved lines. Those are the most dynamic lines of all. Curved lines have a feeling of movement, okay? The reason is that the spiral of a galaxy, the spiral of a seashell, the crash of a wave as it spirals, all these kind of spiral and gentle curvatures that we find in nature have energy. They are in the middle of being energetic. And even our spine, which has a slight curve in it, right, is there because it allows us to create energy when we move, okay? So that's a potential energy, potential meaning it has the ability to create motion, okay? And we think of motion as very dynamic. That's one of the most dynamic things we can think of, right? So it's organic, it has a feeling of flowing, it has a feeling from nature of movement, of spiral, okay? So this is very man-made, and this is very from nature, okay? So next we're going to discuss these different shapes, okay? A shape is a line that closes up, okay? And it doesn't have to be these shapes up here, but these are kind of the general shapes that we see a lot when we draw, okay? And as artists, those are some of the shapes that when we're starting to shade, we practice a lot. And then we move on to still lifes and the portraiture and all these different things, okay? But these lines help us find boundaries, and they help us find the internal shapes within something that we're drawing so that we can find the whole shape of the entire object, okay? So kind of like a forest, you have to be able to see certain trees to appreciate the whole forest. So this is going to teach you to understand the trees so you can make the forest, okay? So sit tight, hold on, and we will get to drawing soon, but this lecture is very important so you understand what it is you're drawing, and if you make a mistake, oh hey, now I kind of see why I made a mistake and how to fix it. And by the way, mistakes are very good in art. Don't let anybody tell you differently. You learn through mistakes in art. In fact, when you're first starting art, I hope that you make lots of mistakes, and I mean that in a very genuine way, because you will learn very quickly, and you just got to throw out the idea of, ooh, a mistake equals bad. It does not equal bad. It equals progress. Okay? So here we have a rectangle. Okay, these are 2D shapes. We have a triangle, we have a circle, and we have a square. What's the difference between these, you're asking? Sometimes people get confused with shapes, right? A rectangle has longer sides and then shorter sides like this. So it is elongated. It's an elongated box. It's stretched out, okay? And then you have a triangle, which is 3 points and 3 lines, 1, 2, 3, okay? And triangles come in different variations and different lengths. But in general, we're going to focus on just a simple triangle like this. And I think, if I remember correctly, don't quote me, it's an isosceles. I might be wrong. And here is a circle. Okay, circle is an arc, 2 arcs, or a single line that is formed into one long continuous line that goes around. Okay, when a circle starts to get smushed like this, we call it an ellipses. All right, and we will see a lot of those too. Not too often do you see a perfect circle when you're drawing something. We see variations of circles kind of smushed or elongated and all kind of morphs of circles and spheres later on. And then the last one is a box, okay? And, yes, a box. And those are your 2D shapes, okay? A box is same on all 4 sides. And those turn into some of our 3D shapes here. Now the 3D shapes is what we're going to see a lot when we start to sketch and do shading, because we have to be aware of 3D shapes. But first, before we get too deep into that today, we're going to discuss how to find these shapes first. But just a little bit so you can marinate it in your brain. Let's talk about these for just a minute. This rectangle can morph into a tall rectangular box. You have your vertical, horizontal, and diagonal lines. Or from the side, remember we're looking at it flat from the side, it can also turn into a cylinder, okay? Which is a circle on the top and the bottom and a tube that goes up and closes itself, right? Now the triangle can turn into a cone, which is a smooth surface all the way around, which is rotated, like so, with a pointy top and a round bottom, right? It can also turn into something that's kind of like a polygon, that has sides on it like this, or we can think of it as a pyramid, okay, where we have a bunch of different sides like this, like the Great Pyramids in Giza, okay? Then a circle turns into a sphere. A sphere is just a ball that comes out to you 3D shape. Instead of being flat like this, it has shape, okay? And as we talked about before, a sphere can also morph into all these strange egg shapes and smooshed shapes and kind of globular shapes, okay? And those are all variations of a sphere to begin with. And our last one here is a box, okay? Or a cube. A box turns into a cube, a square turns into a cube, okay? But from the side, it may also be a cylinder, okay? Depending on how you draw it or if you transform it, because that length can look the same on both sides like this until you rotate it and you see a circle there, okay? And the last one here that we don't think of very often or get taught very often is a plane. Now, a plane is a connecting surface between different shapes when we're drawing. When we're not talking about it mathematically, I don't do math, you gotta go to somebody else for that, okay? But a plane here, that is gonna be a flat area that merges from one area to the next. So it's kind of like the glue between shapes. So we keep our eye out for planes a lot. We see a lot of those, okay? Now I'm going to circle the shapes for you that you see the most. Up here we have our 2D, and then below it we have our 3D. Triangle can become cone, or a pyramid shape, or any shape that has sides on it that goes from a point to larger sides. Usually it becomes a blunted cone like this. Over here we have a circle, which becomes a sphere, which is 3D, or it can become an ellipses kind of shaped, or like an oblong kind of sphere, something smushed like an egg. Up here we have the square. The square can turn into a box, which is the same size on all sides, or it can turn into a plane. And a plane is thought of as, or two different shapes that are merged with an area of kind of a weird, kind of almost sheet-like design. And then over here, you have a rectangle, which turns into a rectangular box. And then down here, you also have a cylinder. Now, if we look over here, certain ones that we're going to see more often, the star ones, like so, are going to be ones we see more often. The ones that are circled in green are the ones we're going to see more often. And once again, the ones that are outlined with little points on them in red, those are the very angular ones that we are not going to see very often in our organic structures when we're drawing. In your kit, you're going to have this picture of an elephant to start out. Yours may be in color or it may be in black and white. More than likely, it's going to be in black and white. So what we are going to do is I'm going to go through the different shapes here and help you find how they appear in everyday objects. Now, this is a beautiful elephant. If we look and see here, we can see already that the elephant is very rounded. So just keeping that in mind, we're going to put a sphere over here with a smiley face on it, because we see a lot of those, a lot of round. If you see a lot of round, start looking for a sphere. Next, we see that he has, or she has, some kind of elongated legs. They're pretty tall, actually. And if you quick glance at them, they kind of look kind of like squares, right? A lot of times when we draw an elephant, we draw them with square legs when we're children. And if we look at the ear here, that kind of also looks like a triangle turned sideways like this. See it? And then remember how we talked about in nature we see something called an arabesque, or rather, I don't know if we talked about it, but we will for a second. An arabesque is any kind of curved line which does something that kind of invokes a feeling of movement. And as you can see up here in our beautiful little elephant, that trunk is raised in kind of an arabesque kind of way. So we want to keep our eye on that. Also, we want to keep an eye on curved lines like we talked about prior in this lesson. So looking at our elephant now, we're going to start breaking down the shapes. And a lot of times in art, people say, oh, you shouldn't ever trace something. That's baloney. Tracing is just fine when you're starting out because it helps you understand space. It helps you understand proportion, which is how large or small or far apart things are. And it also helps you understand shapes. And without all those things, it's going to be very hard for you to find boundaries, which remember is the separation between two things when we draw them. So we want to separate the background from our elephant right? And we're not going to draw it right now, but if we did, we'd have to know where one begins and one stops. So let's find the boundaries. And we're going to start right here. Very gently, I'm just going to start to outline here the shape of, look at that, almost a perfect circle in that body of the elephant if we look at it like that. And don't be afraid to crisscross your shapes while you're doing this. It's just a learning exercise, okay? And it's going to help you get better. Also, don't be afraid to erase. That's totally fine. Erasing is great in art. It helps you learn. Every time you correct a mistake, it sticks to your memory better. So making mistakes is kind of helpful, actually. So I'm going to go up here. I'm going to look at the leg. And if I look this way, it kind of looks like a cone, kind of like that, right? But it's turned this way. The bottom half of the leg kind of looks kind of like a cylinder or a rectangle, like we said. In 3D, it looks like it's rounded, but right now we're just trying to find the 2D shapes. So 2D right now, okay? We're looking at the 3D shape and we're turning it into a 2D shape. It's kind of funny that way when you're drawing. You have to go back and forth between the two. But to start out to find your boundaries, you need to do it this way. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to add in the cone structure there, or the triangle, okay? And then over here at the top, see that little area that's in between? Remember we talked about that before as a plane, okay? And there's not quite a shape that's made there. It's an area in between two shapes, okay? So here at the leg there, we are going to go ahead and turn that into a shape. And let's look, when I look at this, it looks like a column, so it's almost kind of a rectangle, like this one. Same thing with this one here, kind of a rectangle. This one back here is kind of a rectangle. And remember, you can always adjust your shapes as you go or afterwards. Right now, we're trying to lay out the basic structure of this elephant using this system that we have. Up here, we see a little bit of a sphere. And if we look at the face, there's lots of little shapes in it, but we want to identify the ones that really stick out the most. So this is an old art trick that's been used for a very long time, for basically as long as people have been painting and drawing realistically. What you can do is take off your glasses if you have glasses. If not, if you're somebody who can cross your eyes, well, you're in luck. Or if you have astigmatism and you have problems seeing a little bit, you're in luck. Because what we're going to do is we're going to look at it with blurry eyes, or crossing our eyes just a little bit. And when we do that, our shapes pop out easier. Isn't that interesting? Give it a try. I'll give you a second. Crossing your eyes slightly. Taking off your glasses if you have them for just a moment, especially if you have astigmatism, which means things are blurry. Do you see the shapes popping out? Isn't that interesting? And that little technique will help you identify shapes easier. So if you're somebody who has a hard time with that, go ahead and use that technique. All right, and up here we're looking at the shape of the head, and I see down here, I see a triangle like that. And then I see kind of a circle where the eye is. And then I see kind of a circle there. And this trunk, I'm going to go ahead and outline it because it looks like a long skinny cone. If we look this way here, it's like somebody rounded a cone out. And then if we look at the little tusks, look at that. Those are little tiny cones or little tiny triangles, okay? We're not adding tons of little shapes to this with colors and anything else. We're just outlining it. And the tail is just a little rectangle. So we'll know if we did this right if we pull away our picture like so and set it down. And what you want to do is you want to get rid of the connecting geometry or the shapes in between. So right now we know if we look at our picture, that part isn't connected. The top of the hip, you can't really see it right there. You can't see this part or that part there. The leg goes a little bit more like that. This part's gone. This part here is gone. And there you go. You have the shape and the outline of a beautiful little elephant. For this next section, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the human hand. The reason we use the human hand is because it has a lot of these organic shapes in them. So it has the spheres and the circle. It has the cones and the triangle. and it has the cylinders and like the kind of squarish or rectangle shapes. So everybody's hand is different. Lucky for us, most of us have a hand on our arm. If you don't, it's okay. You can look at pictures of it. One has been handed out to you in your handout kit. Get it? Handout kit? Haha. You're welcome. What we're going to do here is we're going to take a look at the different shapes the same way we just did with the beautiful little elephant. We have our triangle, we have our square, we have our rectangle, and we have our kind of oblong sphere that's going to be kind of different shapes. It's going to be like smushed. And remember, any of these shapes can be smushed or stretched. It's okay. And how you draw your hand might be different than I draw mine. But if you do your best to try to find the most accurate shapes, it'll look exactly like this hand. Even if your shapes are a little off from this hand, if you do enough communicating of some shapes that are right, we'll be able to identify it as a hand. So let's go ahead and start out here. If we look at this part of the hand, it kind of looks like an Easter egg kind of palm area there. Kind of looks bright like that. And I also see kind of a meaty section here, looks kind of like that, okay? And down here we have the arm, and if we think of the arm, let's look at the arm for a second. That sure does look like a long cylinder to me, right? So I'm going to go ahead and pretend that it's a cylinder. I'm just going to go right off the page here, okay? And we'll think of it like a rectangle since it's flat. Remember, rectangle can turn into a cylinder and vice versa. And now you have different ways you can approach the fingers. You can break them down exactly where the joints are, and that kind of tells you where it stops in each area. So two ways you can do that is you can do it the easy way like this, where you start off and you make kind of a cone to go like that, okay? And notice even if you finish the cone, look at that, it happens where the knuckles are. So this hand is a little more flat on top than it is rounded. When it comes to the fingers here, go ahead and do that so we can see what it looks like. And then the shapes in here, this one kind of looks like a circle again. This shape here with the fold looks kind of like a triangle. And then this one over here is one of those shapes that's kind of in between where it's kind of flat and we don't really have a name for it, so we call that, or at least I do when I'm teaching here, I call that a plane. Whoops, can't see the point on that. Okay, so that means a structure that stretches from one area to the next. Then we have our thumb over here. Our thumb looks kind of rounded at the bottom, right? And then we have over here, comes down kind of like a cone again. And then you have another surface there that connects. Okay, so if we take that away for a second. Come here, tape. We can see the general outline, the shapes of the hand. And if we erase, like so, we get rid of some of these different shapes, these in-between shapes like that. Right there. Like there. And by the way, every shape that you identify, you won't use in your final drawing when you draw something. A lot of drawing is mapping stuff out and finding space for things. Go. All right, so it looks a little something kind of like that, right? Now I'm going to erase this section right here, looking for more broken down detail shapes. Okay, so that was like a real general, if you have to make a hand of some kind of shape, right? Now let's really look for the real shapes, the most accurate shapes, the shapes that really are exactly as they are. So right here we can see that this is kind of a circle there, kind of a circle area here, circle there, same here, and even on the thumb, kind of a circle there, okay? If you look at your own fingers, you can notice towards the top of your finger, it looks shiny like a sphere, like the one that's in your handout. So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna find the structure of the rest of the hand. So we know down here, we have a cylinder that happens. Goes out like so. Down in this area here, we're going to go up and we're going to turn this into more of a big fat Hershey Kiss kind of cone. Remember how I said cones can be smushed or elongated or stretched? There's a good example of that. Okay. Up here, I see which looks like kind of a box shape or kind of a cylinder shape. I see kind of a triangle shape, and then I have a plane area that connects. Over here, I have kind of a cylinder shape, a cylinder shape, cylinder shape. All throughout these are all cylindrical shapes. Bring them together. And a lot of times on organic things, there's a structure underneath like muscles and bones and things like that. And if you're really interested in learning how to draw animals and people, you kind of want to get a picture of their bones underneath too, or their muscles. Sounds kind of gross and grody, but it will help you become a much better drawing artist if that's what you're into. Now the rest of this area here, I'm going to outline, looks to me kind of like it did before, almost like a circle there. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and just make a fold there and right there just to add it in. And I'm going to connect this structure here. So when I do that now, we're going to have a little more of an accurate description of a hand. Can you see it? There it is. Now, here comes the fun part. This next section will teach you how to transfer that yourself. So what you're going to do is you are going to take your sheet of paper, you're going to put it off to the side, and what we're going to do is we're going to make the shapes that we see here and put them down here. Okay, so we have kind of a circle shape that comes out like this. We have a Hershey Kiss shape that comes around here. We have a little triangle shape that kind of comes there. We say a box shape that comes right about there. We have a circle shape that comes out there that connects to that area. Down here in our Hershey Kiss, right about there, we're going to bring out this cylinder. Bring that a little bit bigger. Bring out our cylinder, connect it a little bit. And this is a sketch. Remember, when you're sketching, you can leave yourself some space. Okay? Sketching is about correcting and recorrecting. Don't be afraid to erase. I'm certainly probably going to erase in a second. I have cylinder, cylinder, and then the top, it's rounded. Going to do the same thing. This one sticks out a little bit further. So let's, start this guy there. Cylinder with a circle at the top. Another cylinder. Another cylinder. And what you want to do when you're drawing things like this is called triangulation. You guessed it, a name that sounds exactly like the object, right? Triangle means 3 different points of reference. So if we look over here, we can see I'm measuring how close this line is to this line. But to know how far away that is, I have to have a third line. So maybe I'll use this one here. So that's boom, boom, boom up here to there. My eyeball's looking at those places to triangulate, which means to correct my course to where it's going to be. All right, kind of like your GPS does when you're running around and you're trying to figure out where you're going. Your brain can do the same thing by using 3 little points wherever you're looking, 3 spots to compare them. Okay, so if you're getting stuck, use your 3 spots for reference. Now, where was I? Down here, got our finger there, got our thumb, our finger 1, finger 2 here, and then we're going to move down this way over here to this guy. He's about halfway up here. I'm going to move over there. He's about halfway up there, and then this guy comes up here. And then down here, we have a little bit of a space. If you look, there is a little bit of a V going up. There. Box. Or we see it as a cylinder in real life, right? Comes down. It's going to go like that. And I'm going to recorrect over here to thicken up my circle a little bit. And then recorrect over here. Okay, so I've recreated this for the most part, minus this little area there, using the method of finding 3 points of reference, okay? And I'm just using the shapes that we already talked about. These shapes right here. You can see them right there in the human hand. Another good way to do that is to do this. So if you're at home, what you can do is you can take your own hand to try to find the shapes. You want to keep your hand in a space like this, or you can lay it flat, whichever is helpful. And what you can do is you can go like this to find the shape that you see. Looks like kind of a square today, like that. You have cylinder, and do not do this with anything but a washable marker, otherwise you're gonna look like a mannequin all day. Goes up, box. Remember, we have circles at the top, like so. And what's nice about this is once you've outlined this, you can kind of see this a little bit easier when you change up your drawing. And you'll see what I mean in just one second. If I go like this, you're not going to see it as easy, but you see the shapes that are made on the edges come towards you. And then new shapes develop. If I go like this, suddenly I have a cylinder kind of shape that happens there, right? And then maybe this one here is still kind of a box, or it's like a plane. Remember we said a plane is kind of like a sheet of paper between two things. So you want to practice that with your hand. You want to practice drawing on top of your drawing. You'll get several versions that you can practice on top, and then you're going to want to draw next to it so you can see if you can replicate it. And eventually you're going to be able to draw very quickly what you see. If you see here, I've outlined all the portions of my hand much thicker. So if I turn towards you, even at an angle that changes, you can see how the shapes change. So if you're having trouble identifying shapes later, this is a really good way to do something right in front of you. Okay, I highly recommend this. It works really well with Crayola markers. You have some washable Crayolas at home. Even go down and outline your hand a little bit. Feels kind of silly, right? But art's kind of fun and silly sometimes. Ooh, normal hand, funky hand. Normal hand, funky hand. Okay, back to art. So when you turn this different ways towards you, when you do this, and it's called foreshortening, the shapes change, but you can still draw them differently. And when you put them together, you get the appearance of a hand in a different position. You can do this for anything in real life that you're allowed to draw on. Hands are a good example.